An NFL player has a nifty second career lined up for him when he's done with football. He's the heir to America's biggest potato empire. We'll mash up that story, plus we're talking about Joel Embiid and Kevin Durant with a former NBA exec, and we have stories from baseball, tennis, the NFL, and college football. It's Wednesday, November 6th. I'm Owen Poindexter, and this is Front Office Sports Today. In today's episode, our reporter Alex Schiffer serves up an exclusive story on the Saints' Connor McGovern and his family's vast potato-related wealth. We're also chatting with former NBA exec Scott Perry on that league's biggest off-court topics. Plus, college football is coming to IMAX theaters, and Kevin Durant is in a public fight with Stephen A. Smith. First, here are your top headlines. The NFL trade deadline was yesterday at 4 p.m., and teams have started sorting themselves into contenders and ones that are hoping for better luck next year. Among the biggest moves, the Lions acquired Saints defensive end Zadarius Smith for 2 picks. The Bills gave up a third-round pick for Browns receiver Amari Cooper. The Ravens got Panthers wide receiver Deontay Jones for a pick swap. The Commanders gave up a third-round pick and more for Saints cornerback Marshawn Lattimore. All in all, there are more than a dozen trades, and halfway through the season, we now know semi-officially who's going for it and who isn't. The first official college football playoff rankings are out. Currently, the 4 teams that would receive a first-round bye in the 12-team playoff are Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and Miami. They're followed by 3 7-1 teams, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, and then undefeated Indiana. The last 4, who would be in if the playoffs started today, are BYU, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Boise State. Alabama has 2 losses, and there are a handful of 1-loss teams currently on the outside looking in, such as SMU, Iowa State, and undefeated Army. Sure, everyone agrees with these, and there will be no debates. 76ers star Joel Embiid has been suspended for 3 games for pushing Philadelphia Inquirer columnist Marcus Hayes. The penalty will begin with the next game he is eligible to play in and will cost the Star Center $1.1 million. Jason Kelce began ESPN's Monday Night Countdown by addressing his altercation with a Penn State student ahead of the school's matchup against Ohio State. The incident saw Kelce slam the student's phone on the ground after the student directed a homophobic slur toward his brother Travis. During the opening segment of ESPN's Monday Night Countdown, Kelce said, "I'm not proud of it. In a heated moment, I chose to greet hate with hate, and I don't think that's a productive thing. I really don't. I try to treat people with common decency, respect, and I'm going to keep doing that moving forward, even though I fell short this week." A game-worn Michael Jordan jersey from the 1996-97 season sold for nearly $4.7 million earlier this week. The jersey was worn in at least 17 games during that season and is the only red authenticated jersey from Jordan's first 5 championship seasons. The $4.7 million price tag makes it the 4th most expensive NBA jersey of all time, beyond Jordan's $10.1 million Last Dance jersey, a $5.8 million signed Kobe Bryant jersey from his lone MVP season, and a $4.9 million Lakers jersey worn by Wilt Chamberlain during the 1972 finals. Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry started an arbitration hearing against Minnesota Timberwolves and Lynx owner Glenn Taylor after Taylor said the teams are no longer for sale. A decision on whether the teams are up for sale or not is expected to come out sometime in December. Should the arbiters rule in Taylor's favor, he'll be able to end the sale process and remain as controlling owner of the 2 teams. Should Lowry and Rodriguez win, Taylor would be contractually compelled to sell them the controlling share for the previously agreed on $1.5 billion valuation. In that scenario, 23 of 30 NBA owners would still have to approve the sale. Up next, we have a fun one about an NFL player who belongs to one of the most powerful families in U.S. agriculture. The Saints' Connor McGovern is the son of the owners of R.D. Offutt, which is the biggest potato producer in the U.S. Our reporter Alex Schiffer grilled McGovern, hashed out the details, and fried up this exclusive story, and he joins us next. Joined now by Front Office Sports breaking news and enterprise reporter Alex Schiffer. Welcome, Alex.
What's going on, Owen?
Hey, so you wrote a pretty fun little feature for us about Saints center Connor McGovern and how he may be losing money by playing in the NFL instead of just going straight into the family business as one of the nation's leading potato empires. What's the story here?
Yeah, this is not to be confused with Bills offensive lineman Connor McGovern. There are 2 Connor McGovern NFL offensive linemen in the league at the same time. And this is a story I've kind of had on my radar since college. Connor was 2 years ahead of me at Missouri. And there were kind of hints to me over the years that he came from some money, but it wasn't until I saw a Wikipedia blurb about this. His family is one of the nation's leading commercial farmers or farm companies. They are the leading potato producer essentially in America. And take that, Idaho. And They provide the potatoes used at Wendy's French fries, McDonald's, Raising Cane's, you name it. And just a cool backstory to where your point of not too many athletes can say that they're losing money by playing in the NFL, but he might be one of the rare exceptions.
Yeah, and so he's made about $34 million in his NFL career so far. He's 31 now. What do we know just like about his the options he had in terms of like joining the this premier American potato empire?
Yeah, he was an agricultural economics major at Missouri. So kind of went into school knowing he wanted to be part of the family business. He had a good career. He was all SEC. He was a certified, I think he was a fifth round pick. So he was kind of, a certified, it's not like he was like Mr. Irrelevant or anything. He went firmly in the draft. And to your point, the family's worth over 500 million. His career earnings are less than 10% of that. Trying to do a little bit better math there, but that's about as good as it's going to get. So yeah, he's pursued this pro career, and he went into this season unsigned after dislocating his knee during the Jets season last year, and he was kind of weighing between potatoes or protecting the pocket to keep the peas going, and he was signed to the Jets practice squad, which is really low money. Obviously, he can afford it based on his career earnings and also his family background. And then he was signed off the Saints to the Saints off the Jets practice squad. The Saints coaching staff, there's some overlap there from when he played in Denver, which is why they took him. They're familiar with him. And, he went from thinking about retiring and joining the potato empire to now maybe having a little bit long of an extended career.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like obviously he's making good money, what most people would call good money in the NFL. And what kind of future awaits him as in the potato world?
Yeah, he said there's no nepotism in the family empire. He's gonna have to start towards the bottom and make his way up. And we'll see when that happens. It could have been his. It's funny, we're recording this in the first couple of days of November. His deadline for retirement was November 1st originally. He had said if he didn't get a call from an NFL team at this point, he would start cutting weight, changing the way he works out. You see the offensive linemen all go through that like Slimmons phase after they're done playing. Now they don't have to carry all that weight around. He was about to be doing that. So we'll see where he starts. I'd asked him, is there a particular part of the business that interests you? And he said, not really. I studied this in school. I've been around it my whole life. Like there's not one thing I'm fully attached to. So it'll be interesting to see if he is the potato king come 5-10 years down the line.
And yeah, just from your conversations with him, how does he view his life situation, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. He's definitely, it's funny, there's a few offensive linemen that I covered. I always thought they were the best interviews at Missouri. And they always pegged him as pretty quiet, but he was very talkative for this. And he said, this is my family. I don't advertise it. My parents kept me very humble, but like, I'm also not embarrassed to talk about it. Like, look at what we've built as a family. There's some pride there. So I definitely think that he kind of tries to walk the line of like being humble, but also like not like ashamed or like trying to sweep it under the rug of where he comes from and his backgrounds. And it's funny, I asked a couple guys, was how well known was this? So I had known because his family had this tailgate in this certain corner of the stadium at school where they had this gigantic trailer painted in black and gold with McGovern 60 on the hood. And I actually have been in the trailer in question. And, I learned that they kind of kept it every week during the season at the local airport. And I just kind of thought like, yeah, it's not LaGuardia, but like, it can't be cheap. You know what I mean? So he's had his own little ways of kind of telling people, or, letting you put it together for yourself. And, he's been such a good football player that he hasn't had to like, make it his calling card or be the thing that, totally associated with his identity. So it's been interesting the way he's kind of walked the line of letting people know, keeping it to himself, explaining it, trying to have the right mix of emotions, all that stuff.
So my favorite anecdote in the story was about how the McGovern family treats potatoes just when they're having dinner. Like if you go to their house, there's a certain etiquette around eating potatoes. What's the deal there?
Yeah, when you are having dinner at the McGovern family, whether it's Thanksgiving, whether it's, friends coming over, the potatoes get eaten first. There's no batting order. There's no order of operations. The potatoes go first, and then we can talk. It's like that's their way of saying grace, I guess.
Yeah. So if you have like a burger and fries, You can't just go back and forth. The fries
No,
have
the,
to
the
be
fries
done.
go first. Yeah, there is preferential treatment. There is a fast pass for the potatoes to make a Disney ride reference. They get first crack at your appetite, and everybody else is playing for seconds.
Yeah, and so you got to be careful how much, the quantity of potatoes you're putting on your plate if it's like one of those
Yes,
situations, because some people
yes.
are a little loosey goosey with that.
And this is all form. This is fries. This is potato salad. This is potatoes mashed, baked potatoes. I'm running out of different types of potato, but
But there are a lot. Yeah.
yes, exactly. And that's the thing, is that it does not matter what form they go first.
Yeah, and this wasn't in your story, but I'm assuming you can't just pass on the potatoes. You can't say, I'm not a big potato guy personally. Like, I'll just have the other parts of this meal because I know I'm gonna have to finish all of this. Like, I have to imagine that's not okay.
Yeah, I mean Connor's like 6'4", 6'5", 300 something pounds. Like I wouldn't want to be the one at that table that like just like, yeah, I'm good. But no, I don't. I wouldn't advise that.
Yeah, and just having delved into this unique NFL potato world, any overall takeaways from, from Connor or from the McGovern potato empire?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is just what teammates have said over the years. He said how he didn't advertise a lot in college, but in the NFL, some guys it was very 50-50. If some guys would be like, "That's so cool," you don't have to be playing this, and yet this violent sport. Obviously, offensive line, you're like literally in the trenches, as they say. It's not like you're a safety or a punter or something like that. So it's interesting just how 50-50 it's been of man, that's so cool. I really respect that. And then the other 50% of just like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you just at home counting potatoes? Like, you don't have to be like you're rehabbing a dislocated knee, you had an MCL injury on the same knee. Like, what are you doing? So I think it's interesting just how 50-50 it is, and how I don't know. I feel like, if you were to ask me going in, I feel like it would be closer to one side or the other, maybe overwhelmingly. Like, you're crazy, you're doing football, and when you could be doing this, or just overwhelming on the respect side. So I guess I was a little surprised it was just that 50-50 of like good for you versus like what are you doing at the end of the day.
Discovered an interesting new personality test. Alex Schiffer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, man.
A medical test can reveal your body's biological age, which can show if you are aging prematurely. Better nutrition has been shown to reverse one's bioage. My hope of living longer and healthier is why I take Field of Greens. Field of Greens is an organic superfood fruit and vegetable drink unlike any other. It's serious nutrition. Listen to this. Field of Greens was approved for a university study that doctors believe may lower your body's biological age. That generally means better health. Each fruit and vegetable in Field of Greens was selected by doctors to support vital body functions like heart, liver, kidneys, metabolism, and immune system. Only Field of Greens is backed by this better health promise. At your next physical or checkup, your doctor will notice your improved health or your money back. Join me in better health with 15% off and free shipping. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use promo code FOS. That's promo code FOS at fieldofgreens.com. Fieldofgreens.com. Novak Djokovic is still one of the best tennis players in the world, but at 37, he may be slowing down a little. With his decision to withdraw from the ATP finals in Turin due to injury, he will end this year without an ATP title for the first time since 2005. Federer retired in 2022. Nadal is in his final days as a professional. It looks like we are finally seeing the end of men's tennis Big Three era. The sport was utterly dominated by those three for 2 decades, and now we finally may be heading into a more open landscape, unless we're just going straight into a big two. This year, Jannik Sinner won 2 Grand Slams and Carlos Alcaraz won the other 2. In 2022 and 2023, the only players to win Grand Slams were Alcaraz and Djokovic. In other tournaments, there's a good diversity of winners. On the biggest stages, we're still looking for proof that this sport will continue to be dominated by the 2 or 3 best players. Over to sports media, it's no secret that the movie theater industry hasn't been the same since COVID. Our desire to be in a room full of strangers disappeared and took years to recover, all while home theaters were improving. But people like watching sports together, and they like watching on big screens. That's the basic premise behind Cosm, which just announced a new venue in Detroit, and it's also the impetus behind a deal between NBC and IMAX to air Penn State's whiteout game against Washington in theaters. The game will be broadcast in 23 IMAX theaters across the country, mostly in Pennsylvania and Washington. The only other way to watch is on Peacock, which NBC has been trying to build up by putting premium sports events on it. If this proves popular, sports and movie theaters could become a regular thing, and we will likely see more venues like Cosm, which are built with sports in mind. Stephen A. Smith is now in a public spat with Kevin Durant because Stephen A. called out Durant for not being a great leader. He said he's a top talent in the NBA, a great player in big games, but not someone who elevates his teammates in the locker room. Kevin Durant replied by calling him a clown and saying that he doesn't know why anyone listens to him, and Stephen A. replied with a classic Stephen A. monologue that appeared to take the high road by saying he won't engage in a petty back and forth, and then finished with, "I sincerely wish he doesn't get swept again in the playoffs like he has 2 of the last 3 years." I'm not going to take a side in the fight here. To me, the question of Kevin Durant's leadership is something that you can argue either side of all day and never reach a conclusion, which is why it's perfect for sports talk shows, and Stephen A. knows that, and his nose for this kind of topic is why he's the king of what he does. KD can clap back all he wants, but Stephen A. has bigger microphones and more airtime than Durant, and he can go on about this for as long as he likes, and he probably will because it's great content for him. That said, this is why some athletes become resentful of the media and end up starting their own podcasts and production companies so they have the chance to explain themselves outside of media sound bites. For more on this and other big topics in the NBA, I spoke to someone who is an executive on the Seattle Supersonics team that drafted Durant. Scott Perry joins us next. I'm joined once again by longtime NBA executive Scott Perry. Welcome, Scott.
Good to be here again, Owen. How you doing?
Good. Great to have you on. Let's start with Joel Embiid. So at the start of the season, there was some misrepresentations around his health status that the 76ers were fined over. He then, pushed a reporter after a game who asked him a question about his brother and his son. And it's just, he's on this 3-year, $193 million extension with the team. There's so much invested in this guy, and it's just been a tough early start for them.
No question about it, Owen. Let me address a couple things when it comes to this. First of all, there's an old saying that 2 wrongs don't make a right. As I read about this situation, you're dealing with a player in Joel Embiid who obviously is very frustrated with where he's at in his health status. He knows the amount of investment that's been made in him, as well as Paul George this offseason. So from a front office perspective, there's $400 million on the line invested in this group, and this was supposed to be the group that is capable of getting the Philadelphia 76ers into an NBA Finals. So they're getting off to a very rough start. He's emotional. And when I say 2 wrongs don't make a right, the article that I did read was very tough. And I think a lot of people would agree with me that the writer stepped out of bounds or over the boundary, if you will. And so now you bring the 2 of those things together, it made it very combustible, but that doesn't excuse Joel if in fact he put his hands on the guy and pushed him. So you don't want to see this. And again, I have to just go back to my roots as a front office person and an executive putting together teams. You don't want to start this way. It's a rough start, but the silver lining in it is there's 75 games left for this team. They have a long way to go. You can right the ship, but the ship won't be righted, unfortunately, until Joel Embiid is able to get back on the court with some consistency. And it was a good thing for them last night that Paul George, even though they lost, was able to get back on the court.
Yeah, and on that point of 75 games left, yes, this is a bad start. Yes, George is back, but he's pretty rusty. Same time, they've got Embiid, they've got George, they've got Tyrese Maxey. They're probably not the best team in the East, but you could see them making a run as long as they make the playoffs and are healthy and playing well together by the end of the season. Is that all that really matters here?
You want to be in a position, though. You don't want to just eke into the playoffs, in my opinion, even though they have a lot of talent. So, for instance, again, when you're looking at it, putting this team together, they're not thinking that, okay, if we just get in the 7th or 8th seed, we'll be okay as long as we're healthy in the playoffs, because now you're going to be the road team in every series and you're going to be playing the top end of the Eastern Conference right from the beginning. You don't want a first-round series against the Boston Celtics if you can help it, if you're Philadelphia 76ers. So from that business perspective, you want to stay away from that. But with that being said, there is a reality. And so if injuries and lack of availability of two of your top three players is going to be an issue throughout the season, then you got to get there by any means necessary. And so if it ends up being 7-8, then you have to play those cards. But in putting this team together, there's no way that I think the 76ers brass looked at this group and thought that they would be any less than third or fourth in the Eastern Conference. So to me, that is going to be their North Star for the remaining of the season and figuring out how they can be in the top four teams in the Eastern Conference.
And yeah, so they've got obviously so much money invested in Embiid. Do you think they've gone about it the right way in terms of like attempting to build a championship team around him while they've got this window, as long as he's with them?
Well, look, it's sitting on the sidelines, hindsight can always be 2020. The only concern that I have as looking at how they've gone about this is that they've invested heavily in players who have a rich injury history. Okay, Joel Embiid has been fantastic when he's been on the court, but he has missed a lot of basketball throughout his career. But here's a guy that I know that wants to play and compete, though. See, that's the thing, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why he's frustrated with some of the treatment he's getting. He really wants to play, but his body, for whatever the reason, has not been able to hold up. And those were concerns with him even when he was coming back out of college and entering into the draft. And that's why he didn't probably go number one in the draft. I shouldn't say probably. That's why he didn't go number one in the draft, because of the injury history. So you're taking a real risk when you're putting your eggs and building everything around that type of player. The talent, I understand why you do that, because he's arguably the best center in the game, most talented center in the game. I think Nikola Jokic is probably his most accomplished. But this guy, from a talent perspective, there's nobody better. Then you go out and add Paul George, who was the top name on the free agent market, but you're giving him a lot of money at 34 years old. And over the last 4 or 5 years, his injury history has not been good. So everything has to just work out perfectly from a health standpoint. And there is no data that suggests that it will. So that is the biggest concern. And you have a young star in Tyrese Maxey. But having said all that, I'm never gonna just be overly critical of anyone pushing their chips to the center of the table and say, okay, let's try to win it now. They went about it this way, but those were the flaws and I'm sure they knew this. This is not anything new, but they knew this going into it. And so far, it's gotten off to a rocky start, but hopefully for the Sixers and their fan base, that they can magically have a health string here over the last 7-8 months to give them an opportunity to truly compete.
Yeah, no, I think that's well taken. That it's easy to say, like, what are they doing adding, putting so much money on Paul George when he might be injured for 2 months for the season? It wouldn't be a huge shock. At the same time, it's not like every player in the NBA was available to them this offseason. There's, limited number of guys, and they got the big fish. And yeah, I feel like we're seeing a few of these teams that they've got a big star or two, and they say, we're only going to have this guy for, another couple of years, or he's only going to be a championship player for a couple of years. Let's go for it and see what happens. I feel like you could put in the Clippers in that boat, at least last year, George's old team. The Suns is another one. Yeah. They're an interesting case. They've got Durant, they have Bradley Beal. They've got so much top end talent. And now Stephen A. and Durant are weirdly in this kind of back and forth over like Durant's leadership. Right. And Durant is another of those guys where you look at him and he's got all the talent in the world. If he won the MVP this year, it wouldn't be a huge shock because he's absolutely one of the best players when he's healthy, when things are clicking. But we've seen so many times mostly when he's just injured, and just he's a hard guy to rely on. At the same time, if you've got him, you kind of have to be all in.
Absolutely. And let me date myself for a second, Owen. I was part of the front office staff, along with Sam Presti, in Seattle back in 07 that drafted Kevin Durant. So I spent a complete year, his rookie season, working with Kevin Durant, and you knew at that point he was going to be a very special player. There's not many guys that I've been around in my lifetime that love the game to the degree and the level that Kevin Durant does. And he constantly works on his craft. And leadership comes in a lot of different forms. And it's a lot of times it's easy for any of us to say how we would lead in a certain situation. Kevin Durant, the Kevin Durant that I know is going to stay true to his personality. And his personality is he's going to get in that gym. He's going to work on his game and be the very best player that he can become each and every single night. And he's going to allow that example to resonate within the building with the team he's playing for. And so even at 36 years old, young guys that are coming into the Phoenix Suns organization are watching that. And even the star players like Bradley Beal and Devin Booker, they're seeing that and respecting that. And the biggest difference for the Suns is Coach Mike Budenholzer. And Bud has been proven run in this league. He spent many years with the San Antonio Spurs when they were winning a lot of championships. So that's where he really cut his chops as a coach. And then he went on and did an excellent job both in Atlanta and in Milwaukee, where he became a champion himself as a head coach. So he's going to provide some leadership and also, I believe, help develop Kevin Durant in that perspective too, to become maybe more vocal with his team. But Kevin, I know this much. He's always totally invested in his team. He wants to win. It's unfortunate to see the back and forth. I'm not going to get in the middle of Kevin Durant and Stephen A. Smith. They will have to work that out. Hopefully the two of them will get on a telephone call and put this whole situation behind them. But I believe the Phoenix Suns, though, are going to be a team to reckon with, though, throughout this whole season because of the addition of Coach Bud. And let's not forget that Tyus Jones, I believe now having a true point guard in that starting lineup has been very helpful to him as well.
Yeah, it's another team where if they were at least in the Western Conference Finals, it wouldn't be a shock. They're so good. At the same time, if they just barely made the playoffs and were out in the first round, also not a shock. It's the range of outcomes is just pretty enormous for a lot of teams.
When you put that team together, I always analyze teams from afar, the total roster. The one thing that could be missing from that group is the lack of physicality, especially on the interior. And so as you go deep in the playoffs, that could be exploited against the Phoenix Suns. But we'll see. You've got a full season. You got a trade deadline coming. Maybe they are able to address that and enhance that ability so they can play against the more physical teams in a 7-game series.
And finally, I just want to briefly touch on, Greg Popovich, who's, had some sort of health issue. Obviously, first and foremost, we hope he's doing okay. But he's also the longest tenured coach in the NBA right now. He's he was with the Spurs in the Duncan Robinson era, through Kawhi, and now this new team with centered around Wemby. I'm just wondering, kind of just thinking about his legacy, but also eventually he's not going to be the head coach anymore. Thinking about that organization, what that's going to mean for them.
There's been very few coaches in professional sports, let alone basketball, that have been so synonymous with an organization, a brand, or become a brand onto themselves. Greg Popovich is one of those guys with the San Antonio Spurs. When you say San Antonio Spurs, you mentioned a few of the tremendous transcendent type all-time great players, but Greg Popovich has been there and was there throughout the entire time, played a key role in their development, won plenty of championships. The closest thing I can see to that kind of reminds me of just recently transpired in the NFL with Bill Belichick stepping down from the New England Patriots. He was synonymous for over 2 decades with the success of the New England Patriots. When you talked about New England Patriots, there were 2 names that came up: Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. And they're synonymous with how they run their business. See, I always believe that teams that consistently win or have a chance to win have an identity. And so when you talk about New England Patriots, they had an identity of being well-disciplined, tough. They weren't going to beat themselves. And on the basketball side, the San Antonio Spurs were very similar. They were going to be highly disciplined. They weren't going to beat themselves. They were a low turnover team, and they were extremely efficient. That is the San Antonio Spurs way. Greg Popovich was key to making all that happen for over 2 decades.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope to see him on the sidelines again soon. Scott Perry, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Owen.
Time now for Front Office Sports Tomorrow, where we look ahead to what's coming in the business of sports. At the start of the season, the Colts-Jets Week 11 matchup looked like it was worthy of prime time. Featured a living legend leading a hopeful contender against a highly touted quarterback in his sophomore season. Now both teams are trying to dig themselves out of a hole, but they won't be doing it on Sunday night. The NFL has used its schedule flexing power to bump them from Sunday Night Football and will replace them with the Bengals and Chargers, both of whom have more realistic hopes for the playoffs. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying the show, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, leave us a rating or review wherever you like to tune in. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.